It was a typical September afternoon in Berlin. 14-year-old Georgine Kruger had just gotten off the bus near her home in the Moabit district. She was supposed to walk just a few hundred meters to her doorstep. Her family had no reason to believe anything was amiss. But Georgine never arrived. She had big dreams. She was an aspiring model, a young girl with a future full of possibilities. That day, she was anticipating a call from a casting agent for a new TV role. Yet, instead of answering the phone, Georgine vanished into the city. No struggle, no signs of where she went, and no one to explain why. Her disappearance would puzzle the authorities and shake her family to their core. For years, investigators searched relentlessly, but the case went cold. Theories abounded. Did she run away? Was she kidnapped? Or did someone in the shadows know more than they were letting on? What no one knew then was that the answers were closer than anyone could have imagined. A man living just doors away from Georgine, someone known to her family, was about to change everything. His confession would unravel a chilling truth that had remained hidden for over a decade. This is the heartbreaking story of Georgine Kruger's disappearance, how a family's worst nightmare was finally brought into the light, and how justice for Georgine was ultimately served. On the afternoon of September 25, 2006, in the heart of Berlin, 14-year-old Georgine Kruger stepped off the bus after school, just as she had done countless times before. The day was nothing special, just another Tuesday in late September. It was cool but not too cold, with the sun shining faintly through the clouds, casting a soft light on the streets of the Moabit district. Georgine had a brief walk ahead of her, only about 200 meters. Her home was within reach, and in that moment, nothing seemed out of place. Her mother, Ingrid, was waiting for her at home, preparing lunch. Georgine had been eager to hear back from a casting agent regarding a role she had recently auditioned for. The young girl had dreams of becoming a model, an actress. She had aspirations that her family was eager to support. She wasn't just another teenager. Georgine was ambitious and full of life, looking forward to what the future would hold. But that afternoon, as Georgine stepped off the bus, she would never make it to her door. The minutes ticked by, and Georgine still hadn't returned home. Her mother, a single parent, wasn't initially alarmed. She thought maybe Georgine had stayed longer at school, or maybe was hanging out with a friend. But as the hours went by, Ingrid's concern grew. By 4 p.m., Georgine's phone wasn't answering. Ingrid's anxiety escalated into something more intense. She called family members, asking if anyone had seen Georgine. No one had. She rushed outside, frantically scanning the area, but there was no sign of her daughter. No one had seen Georgine walk by. She wasn't at the nearby park or any of the usual spots where she liked to hang out. The thought that something could have happened to her was incomprehensible, and yet the longer she searched, the more undeniable it became. By nightfall, Ingrid couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. The authorities were called in, but the search that followed was nothing short of agonizing. It started like any other missing persons case. Flyers went up around the neighborhood, the police interviewed friends and classmates, and neighbors were asked if they had seen anything. But no one had. Georgine's absence seemed to have no explanation. The investigation revealed no evidence of a struggle, no signs of forced entry, no threats or unusual behavior. There were no phone calls, no messages, nothing to suggest a ransom or any sort of motive. As the days stretched into weeks, then months, the investigation into Georgine Kruger's disappearance became an increasingly dark puzzle with each passing moment. The 14-year-old girl had vanished without a trace, and the case was quickly turning into one of the most perplexing mysteries that Berlin had seen in years. Despite an exhaustive search by both the authorities and local volunteers, no clear evidence was found, and her family, left in anguish, could only wonder what had happened to Georgine. Berlin was a bustling modern city, its streets crowded, its buildings towering, but none of that seemed to matter when a young girl disappeared so suddenly. Georgine had been just 200 meters from her home, a simple walk after school. Her disappearance was quick, like a shadow slipping into the cracks of the everyday world, leaving no sign of struggle, no warning, just a terrifying absence. In the first hours after Georgine was last seen, her family feared she might have run away, as many missing persons cases often started. But Georgine had no reason to run. Her mother, her grandmother, and her friends knew her as a girl with big dreams. She was supposed to be on the verge of a breakthrough, a promising role in an upcoming television show, something she had been anxiously awaiting. A modeling career was on the horizon, her mother recalled, and Georgine would never have left that behind without a word. So why hadn't she come home? Where had she gone? The authorities quickly mobilized, diving into the investigation. They canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and questioning anyone who might have seen something. They questioned classmates, teachers, and friends, but everyone seemed to be equally clueless. No one had seen or heard anything unusual. In the early days, there was a flood of theories, ranging from the possibility of Georgine simply running away to darker possibilities: abduction, kidnapping, even a tragic accident. But the authorities couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was at play. Georgine's case didn't feel like a typical runaway scenario. Weeks turned into months, and still, no trace of Georgine surfaced. Her family was frantic, but they refused to give up. Flyers with her picture were plastered all over Berlin, her name echoing in local media broadcasts, hoping for a break. But despite all their efforts, the investigation stalled. Every theory was pursued, but every lead came up cold. The pain of her family deepened with each passing day. Georgine's mother continued to push for answers, refusing to believe that her daughter had simply vanished without a trace. She knew her daughter wasn't the type to leave, especially not without saying goodbye. As the months turned into years, the investigation slowly slipped from the public eye. The case became a cold file, a mystery without resolution. Yet Georgine's family clung to the hope that someone, somehow, would find her. That hope wouldn't die, even as the world around them seemed to forget. In 2009, 3 years after Georgine's disappearance, the case was reopened. A fresh team of investigators was assigned to the case, and new techniques and technology allowed them to revisit the evidence with clearer eyes. There were still no clear leads, but the investigation now had new momentum, new purpose. They began re-examining every piece of information, looking at things from a different angle. The police decided to take a step they hadn't considered before. They started looking more closely at Georgine's neighbors. There were people in the apartment complex where Georgine lived who might know something. Someone, perhaps, had seen or heard something that could help. As investigators began to speak with people in the area, one name began to surface repeatedly: Ali K. Ali K. was a 43-year-old man, an immigrant living in Berlin's Moabit district. He didn't have a steady job, and he spent much of his time in a local Turkish cafe. His life seemed ordinary enough at a glance, but there were cracks in his story, cracks that only those who paid close attention would notice. He had a strange and disturbing habit of approaching young girls in the neighborhood. It wasn't just casual conversation. He made them feel uncomfortable with his probing questions and unwelcome interest. His behavior had raised enough concern among local parents that they had begun warning their children to steer clear of him. They said he had a way of staring, of watching from the corners of his eyes. But this behavior wasn't enough to raise alarm bells at the time, until they realized just how close he had been to Georgine. Ali K. had been in the neighborhood for years, but the significance of his proximity to Georgine's family had been overlooked. He lived only a few floors down from them in the same building. A coincidence, perhaps? But as time passed and new evidence came to light, it was becoming clear that it was no coincidence at all. Ali's behavior, when examined under a more suspicious lens, seemed to suggest that he had been watching. He had been watching Georgine, and not just her, other young girls in the neighborhood as well. He had become increasingly fixated on them, and it was hard to ignore the chilling possibility that he had been waiting for the perfect moment to act. By 2016, investigators had begun revisiting all the old leads, re-examining people who had once been peripheral to the case. Ali K. had quietly entered the spotlight, and his name was beginning to surface in the testimonies of several neighbors. They recalled seeing him lurking near the bus stop around the time Georgine had disappeared, his eyes fixed on the young girls who passed by. His presence had been unsettling, strange, even. But at the time, no one thought to connect him to the missing girl. After all, how could they have known? As police dug deeper into Ali's background, more disturbing details emerged. It wasn't just his odd behavior that was cause for concern. It was his past. Ali had a criminal record, one that hinted at a history of troubling behavior. Though he had never been convicted of anything serious, his interactions with young girls had never been entirely innocent. His behavior bordered on obsession, and it was clear that he had been trying to insert himself into their lives. But it wasn't until they began focusing on the connection between him and Georgine that the investigation started to turn. The police started to piece things together. Ali had been in the area on the day Georgine disappeared, and his presence was impossible to ignore once they knew what to look for. As they re-examined the timeline, they began to wonder, had Ali seen something that others missed? Was he lurking nearby, waiting for the right moment? And perhaps most chilling of all, had he been watching Georgine specifically? The case was taking a disturbing turn. Ali was now a person of interest, but there was still no direct evidence that tied him to Georgine's disappearance. For investigators, this was both frustrating and fascinating. They had a suspect who was too close to the crime scene, but no solid proof that he had anything to do with it. In an attempt to move the investigation forward, police decided to intensify their surveillance. They began watching his every move. They interviewed people who knew him. They paid attention to his interactions, hoping that they could catch a break. Then, in 2017, as part of the growing investigation, authorities began to notice something else. Ali's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and his actions were no longer subtle. Neighbors reported that he was acting strangely, and the police, now aware of his potential involvement, began to monitor him more closely. They discovered that Ali had been spending more time in the cafe, speaking to more people, and for some reason, growing more secretive. But there was still nothing definitive, nothing that could truly place him at the scene of Georgine's disappearance. In 2016, the Berlin police set their sights on Ali K. Once again, but this time with a plan, a bold plan. They needed to gather concrete evidence and, most importantly, they needed to get inside Ali's world, into his mind. So, they devised a careful strategy. They would go undercover. They would get close to him, but in a way that would remain undetected, blending into the background like shadows. All the while gathering information. The undercover agents were meticulous, playing their parts with precision. One agent, posing as a businessman with an interest in opening a car wash in Berlin, began frequenting the cafes where Ali often spent his time. The agent carefully struck up casual conversations with Ali, slowly building rapport. At first, the interactions were harmless, small talk, business ideas. Ali was receptive, trusting. He had no idea that the man he was speaking to wasn't who he claimed to be. Ali, unemployed and struggling financially, seemed eager for any opportunity. So when the undercover agent offered him a chance to manage the car wash business they were supposedly starting, Ali was all too eager to accept. It was the break he had been waiting for, his chance at a fresh start, a new job. He didn't know that it was exactly what the authorities needed to get closer to him, to draw him in, and eventually to reveal the truth. Over the next several weeks, the undercover agent and Ali's relationship deepened. They spent more time together, the agent playing his part perfectly, building trust while subtly probing for information. But despite the growing connection, no real evidence came to light. Ali remained careful in his words, evasive when asked about certain subjects. It felt like they were running out of time. In a moment of vulnerability, Ali K. admitted that he had indeed been the one to abduct Georgine. His confession was both horrifying and enlightening, providing a crucial piece of the puzzle that had remained unsolved for over a decade. He described how on the evening of September 25, 2006, he had seen Georgine walking home from school. At first, it seemed like a harmless encounter, but as the minutes passed, things took a dark turn. Ali K. claimed that he had approached Georgine, offering her a ride or asking her for help. But the conversation quickly escalated. He described overpowering her and forcing her into his apartment, where he held her captive. What followed was a violent altercation that ended with Georgine losing her life. The details of his confession were stomach-turning, and it was clear that Ali K. was recounting the events in a way that mirrored the fears and suspicions that had haunted the Kruger family for years. But the confession alone was not enough. Investigators knew they needed to verify his account before they could bring him to justice. They carefully examined the evidence, knowing that any misstep could derail the case once again. A search of Ali K.'s apartment, which had been neglected for years, revealed shocking evidence that confirmed his involvement. Forensic experts discovered traces of a struggle, blood stains that had gone unnoticed in earlier investigations, and even remnants of Georgine's personal belongings hidden away in a drawer. These finds were the missing pieces that finally connected Ali K to the crime. What was even more chilling was that his confession aligned perfectly with the physical evidence found at the scene. The timeline he provided matched with the forensic findings, and it became clear that there was no denying his role in Georgine's disappearance. It was a moment of truth for everyone involved. Georgine's family, who had suffered in silence for over a decade, now had to confront the reality of what had happened to their daughter. It wasn't just the pain of losing her that they had to endure, but the sheer horror of the events that had unfolded in those final moments. The breakthrough didn't just bring closure to the case, it opened up new layers of emotional complexity. For Georgine's family, the knowledge that she had been taken in such a violent and tragic manner was almost too much to bear. Yet, there was some relief in knowing that justice might finally be served. This breakthrough was not just a pivotal moment for the investigation. It was a turning point for everyone who had been touched by Georgine's story. The years of uncertainty were finally over, and the truth about what happened to Georgine Kruger had come to light. But even as the case began to move toward justice, the echoes of that chilling confession lingered, reminding us all of the dark depths to which some people are willing to descend. The prosecution moved swiftly, presenting the case to court in early 2020. The trial became a media spectacle, as the details of Georgine's abduction and murder were laid bare for the public to see. During the proceedings, the prosecution meticulously outlined the evidence, showing how Ali K had stalked Georgine before seizing the opportunity to carry out the crime. They highlighted his disturbing behavior and his previous criminal record, which painted a clear picture of someone who had not just acted on impulse but had planned and executed the crime in a cold and calculated manner. Despite his confession, Ali K tried to minimize his actions, attempting to paint himself as someone who had acted out of desperation or without fully understanding the consequences. However, the court wasn't swayed by his claims of remorse. The evidence was irrefutable, and the emotional impact on Georgine's family and the community was overwhelming. They had waited for years for this moment, and now they could see justice on the horizon. In March 2020, after several weeks of deliberations, the court reached its verdict. Ali K was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Georgine Kruger. The ruling was met with mixed emotions. While Georgine's family was relieved that her killer had been brought to justice, the years of suffering and uncertainty were not easily erased. The community that had been shaken by the crime also found some semblance of closure, knowing that the person responsible for this heinous act would never walk free again. The tragedy led to greater conversations about how authorities handle cold cases and how they should use new technologies and methods to keep pushing forward. It was a realization that, even after years, justice could still be sought. In Georgine's case, it was a long, painful journey, but it ultimately proved that the truth could emerge, no matter how much time had passed. Her case inspired other families who were still looking for their missing loved ones to hold on to hope and to continue seeking justice, no matter how cold the trail became. For Georgine's parents, the weight of the loss will never be fully lifted. Even though the case has been resolved, the grief of losing a child in such a senseless and violent manner stays with them forever. However, knowing that the person who caused their daughter's death was held accountable brought them some sense of closure. The Kruger family's strength and perseverance became a testament to the human spirit and the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. They had endured the unimaginable and came out the other side, fighting for justice, not just for themselves, but for Georgine's memory. The healing process for the Kruger family, while ongoing, was made slightly easier by knowing that Georgine's story was no longer just one of a missing girl. It was now a story of justice and remembrance. A case that went cold, but one that was never forgotten, would now be remembered for its tragic ending, but also for the perseverance of those who loved Georgine. As a community and a society, Georgine's story reminds us of the fragility of life, the vulnerability of children, and the need for collective action when it comes to safety. Her case may have been the focus of Berlin for years, but it serves as a reminder that we must never stop searching for answers, no matter how long it takes. The emotions felt by Georgine's family were universal: grief, relief, anger, and hope. Her story has become a part of Berlin's history, a chapter that changed the lives of those who lived through it, but also a case that gave hope to others still searching for justice. In the end, Georgine Kruger's memory is one of love and perseverance. The Kruger family's unwavering dedication to finding the truth will be remembered long after the final gavel was struck in court. Her life may have been tragically cut short, but she will always be remembered not just as a victim, but as a symbol of the power of never giving up. We may never fully understand why such things happen, but Georgine's story is a powerful reminder that the pursuit of justice must never end. It's about honoring the memory of those we've lost and ensuring their stories are told. As we reflect on Georgine's case, we are reminded of the importance of hope, of patience, and of the incredible strength it takes to keep moving forward when faced with unimaginable pain. Her disappearance changed everything, and it will not be forgotten. After 12 long years, the tragic mystery of Georgine Kruger's disappearance was finally solved. But it doesn't erase the heartbreak her family endured or the lives forever changed. While justice was served with the conviction of Ali K., the question remains, could more have been done to prevent such a horrifying crime? Georgine's story is a stark reminder of how fragile life can be and how important it is for us to remain vigilant. Cases like hers push us to question the lengths we're willing to go to ensure justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. If this case resonated with you, don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. What are your thoughts on the justice system and its handling of cold cases? Should more be done to prevent such disappearances? Hit the like button, subscribe for more true crime stories, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into another chilling case. Let's keep the conversation going, and remember to stay informed because the truth is out there waiting to be uncovered.